It is done. The saga is over. Hubert Davis out as UNC head coach. ESPN's Pete Thamel breaks the news seconds before UNC releases it and confirms it to Brian Murphy and I and others on the beat that have been following this story that's really taken over the NCAA tournament this year, Brian. Since UNC exited early, giving up a 19-point second half lead versus VCU, stirred up the echoes of 5 years of inconsistency and disappointing seasons for Hubert Davis, and ultimately leadership there made the decision to move on, and a decision led by Bubba Cunningham, Steve Newmark, and Chancellor Lee Roberts. Brian, we've both been talking to sources, Chris Lee, our colleague as well, the last couple of days about this really nonstop. I'll hand it over to you because I know you just got off the phone. What do we know?
Yeah, I was looking at Hubert Davis's statement. I think the most important part of what Hubert Davis put out is that he wanted to continue coaching this team, and I think that starts to shed some light onto why this process feels like it took a long time. Let's not forget that loss was only on Thursday. Today is Tuesday. That's less than a week to go from losing that game to VCU to Hubert Davis out, a Tar Heel lifer, out as coach, even though he's 125-54. So not an easy decision. And I think when you see Hubert's statement that he wanted to continue coaching, I think officials wanted to see some changes, and maybe the changes that Hubert Davis was willing to do didn't go far enough. You have a program that's only been better than a 6 seed one time in Hubert Davis's tenure, and I think North Carolina sees themselves as an elite basketball program that wasn't getting elite results. And I think that's why Hubert Davis today is out of a job.
And maybe he could have had an opportunity to really practically make those changes, but I would say in this process, UNC didn't do a lot to quiet the noise that stirred up around Hubert Davis, and it's a multifaceted situation here, right? UNC, the decision, you wonder why this process took so long. There are a lot of constituents. There are a lot of hands in the pot at this university. We saw that play out in real time with the Bill Belichick process. The Board of Trustees, one of those constituents, not as involved anymore, but there's still a lot of hands to feed here. And there's Roy Williams, the former players, there's the donors, there's the team, there's the leadership from Steve Newmark, that AD in waiting, to Bubba Cunningham, the AD at the moment, and obviously the chancellor at the top. So we want to take people a little bit inside the last couple of days in this process and why this took so long.
Yeah, and I could talk to a couple of those, right? I talked to Roy Williams today. On Tuesday. It depends when you're listening to this, but I talked to him on Tuesday, offered him the chance to defend Hubert Davis publicly, which he has done many times in the past, including about a year ago, where he basically gave the same speech he always gives, that he cares more, in his pinky finger than every Carolina fan out there cares in their whole body. He did that about a year ago. I offered him the opportunity this very day to do that, and he declined. He said, "I don't want to. I'm not talking to anybody about this." He offered to talk to me about golf and polo. I should have taken him up on it.
It's another podcast.
I think I could have talked to Roy for a long time about his golf game. Donor support. In this era of college basketball, multi-million-dollar rosters. We're talking 10 to 15, perhaps in coming years, $20 million rosters. You've got to raise that year after year, and when donors don't see return on investment over a period of time, they say, well, why am I going to give this guy another chance to go land players? I mean, Henry Vasar might be the best example, right? That was a transfer portal success for Carolina. Outstanding player. Well, if you want to keep him next year, he's going to probably cost even more. And are you going to be able to generate the kind of funds to not only keep him, but to go try to get 2 or 3 or 4 more Henry Vasars, great transfers, Cormac Ryans, Harrison Ingrams, Brady Mannix. These are the transfers that have been difference makers for Carolina. They cost a lot of money. And to raise that year after year when your results aren't matching up to the amount of money you're spending, I think the collapsing donor support, or at least flagging donor support, played a large role in this as well.
Right. I mean, this was in a lot of ways a make or break year for Hubert Davis, even if it was never explicitly said. It was at least an all-in year, right? Like all the excuses had been taken away, where we come off a season where they just had a roster that didn't fit. They didn't have any bigs.
Right.
They missed the boat in the portal with the Drake Powell team, and it just didn't work. They make the NCAA tournament in the play-in, and they have an early exit. But this year, there's no excuses, right? They pay up for Henry Vasar, who's making a lot of money. They pay up for Caleb Wilson and land a big-time recruit,
right? A
lottery pick recruit. You want to talk about something that Hubert Davis has done well? It is recruiting. He continues to recruit.
Well, at a certain level.
Sure.
I mean, we can get to this, but the problem is 9 miles down the road where in Durham, North Carolina, where Duke just continues to roll out 4 of those guys. They're getting 4 Caleb Wilsons a year. They're getting the National Player of the Year, not just the top 5 pick. They're getting, Cooper Flagg and Con Knipple. Mm-hmm. They're getting, Cameron Boozer, and so they're just constantly. But anyhow, Hubert did a nice job, a good enough job recruiting, I think.
Yeah, no, and that's a fair segue because UNC does not exist in a vacuum, right?
Right.
Duke is their neighbor. NC State is one of their rivals, right? And all those things you just said about Duke magnify the issues at UNC, who, yes, did make a national title his first season, but the further we get away from that, the more that looks like the outlier and the more that the inconsistencies, the lack of player development, and the early exits from the NCAA tournament or just missing it outright glare and look like the norm. And this was a team that in a lot of ways – Hubert, it's a winding season because, they had this huge moment over Duke, but then after the Caleb Wilson injury, he ultimately lost the team. And we saw it in the second half versus VCU. We saw it in the ACC tournament, and it comes down to some of the relationships he has within the program, how he's run the program. I mean, he's brought in the GM, but his staff has been largely stagnant throughout, and that was a big reason for, I think, the improvements that UNC wanted to make going forward, and ultimately they just ran out of time to make them.
Yeah, I mean, a couple of things. You mentioned that this was sort of a make or break year. That was conveyed. Like that was out there long before this year. It wasn't, they squeaked into the NCAA tournament the previous year. It was like, we got to be solidly in the tournament, and we got to be competing for a top 4 seed. Like this,
it's North Carolina.
This 11 seed, this 8 seed stuff, that ain't for us. And they got a 6 seed. Let's make the counter argument. 19-5 with Caleb Wilson. You beat Duke, Kansas, and Kentucky in the same season for the first time since 1982, which ended with a Michael Jordan jumper to win a national championship. 125-54 overall. You did make the NCAA tournament 4 out of 5 years. So, I think if you're Hubert Davis, you make the case that, look, I've been successful. I would say just good wasn't good enough. And in this era of college basketball where, we talked about the money, but also basketball's got to pay for everything else now. Football's got to pay for everything else. You just can't be a laggard in your sport that is the number 1 sport at Carolina. And that, I think, ushers into the next talking point, which is
who are they going to get?
Who are they going to get? Hubert Davis was part of the family, and that's why making this decision was so difficult. Every coach they've hired, including Dean Smith, was part of the family. Dean Smith was a UNC assistant for 3 years under Frank McGuire, gets hired in 1961. Coaches till 1997. Then it's Bill Guthridge, his assistant, gets promoted. Mm-hmm. Then they go to Matt Doherty, a former player. Then they finally land the big fish in Roy Williams, former Dean assistant. Then they go to Hubert Davis, a former Dean Smith player, and Roy Williams assistant. It's been all in the family for 7 decades. Now, for the first time since they hired Frank McGuire, they're going to have to go outside the family. I don't see anyone in the Carolina family that makes sense. If you're going to hire someone in the Carolina family, you just keep Hubert Davis. He's the best coach in the Carolina family at the moment.
It's funny, take people behind the scenes a little bit tonight. Brian Murphy, I'm sitting across from a true Adam Schefter. The way this guy works, the things I've learned from him and how connected he is. He's on the phone minutes before we go on air at 10 o'clock talking to a source. And one of the things I think I took away from the conversation, the same one I had with the conversation earlier with the source, is that they're going big here.
Oh, yeah.
They're going big game hunting.
And as I pointed out in some previous articles, Lee Roberts is a big game hunter.
He is.
Now, say what you will about Bill Belichick, but they aimed as high as they possibly could. 6-time NFL Super Bowl champion, coaching legend. They aimed big. I mean, think about what Lee Roberts is trying to do on campus. He's trying to build an entirely new campus 2.5 miles up the road from UNC. He calls it the biggest expansion of their campus since 1790s when the campus was built. He wants to move the basketball arena there. He's
got a best to make with the football team. It's a new season, starting fresh.
He doesn't think small, and I think if you make this move, you're not trying to replace Hubert Davis with another good, above average coach. You are shooting for the stars.
So who are those stars? I think we've heard some names. It's going to get whittled down in the next couple of days. A name that's been repeated to me throughout has been TJ Otzelberger at Iowa State. I think, Todd Golden was the betting favorite, but I think kind of what we're learning tonight is maybe he might be coming back to Florida, right? A report broke earlier today that they're already in contract extension negotiations, so that ship might have sailed or might just not have been a fit. And then who are some other guys that you're hearing? Or that seem reasonable to say?
Yeah, let's just look at the number one seeds. Well, you're not getting John Shire, right? Mm-hmm. Look at the number one seeds in this year's NCAA tournament.
You're not getting John Shire?
You're not getting John Shire. Maybe the best coach in the country at this point when you combine recruiting.
Let's see how he matches up against Pitino.
When you combine recruiting, age, on-court stuff, but we'll move him to the side. But look at your other number one seeds. Dusty May at Michigan, Tommy Lloyd at Arizona. Look, Michigan and Arizona, both very good jobs. Both have won national championships. Not those coaches, but those schools have won national championships. But I think North Carolina sees themselves as like a cut above those schools, and so they think,
sure,
can you get a Dusty May? Can you get a Tommy Lloyd? Can you get TJ Otzelberger? You should be able to get from Iowa State. And then let's talk about the real big fish. I don't think Brad Stevens is leaving his current job. He's that's a Rolls-Royce job that he's got.
I've heard that name floated out there by a few people, but it just doesn't make sense.
Yeah, Jay Wright left Villanova because of all this nonsense. But what about a guy like Billy Donovan? Report out today that maybe he's looking to step away from the Chicago Bulls. Does he try to get back in the college game?
Can he do it in the NIL era is what I wonder. It's been a long time. That's when I was in college when he was winning at Florida.
06 and 07 won national titles there, and I think so that's the kind of pond I believe that they're fishing in. I mean, I think Mark Byington is a name that's come up a lot. He's Vanderbilt. At Vandy. He feels like a second tier. If we can't land any of those guys, maybe we look at Byington, who I think played at UNCW, has some connections to the state. One name I've thrown out is Jay Lucas, who has the resume. He coached at Kentucky, coached at Duke. 1 year at Miami, very successful, made the NCAA tournament. His dad obviously is a longtime coach, so it's sort of in his blood. But I think UNC is aiming a little bit higher than that.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see. I mean, Jay Lucas, what a story that would be. Talk about a rivalry. Well, plenty to come here in the coming days. We are going to empty the notebooks. We've been covering this. There's been so much that we've heard, so much that we can't report. We work to continue to confirm and just kind of dig into what went wrong under Hubert Davis, where they go from here. I think the impression we get, Brian, I'll give you one last word here, is I think this is going to be a quick search. I think they said they have a search firm in the email, and I think they have a pretty good idea where they want to go here.
Yeah, and I think Pat's done a terrific job of reporting this story out as well, and I think you're dead on with that. The transfer portal opens April 7th, the day after the national championship game. One issue, potentially, some of those names we just threw out, they may very well be playing for a national championship in early April. And so how does that complicate your search if Tommy Lloyd might be interested, but he takes Arizona all the way to the Final Four and maybe the national championship game? What do you do? Do you wait or do you move on to somebody else? And I think that is probably the most complicating factor at this point. No doubt North Carolina's already made contact, whether that's initial contact, whether that's through back channels with agents. They kind of saw this coming, and I think they've already been moving in the market.
Well, it is truly a new era at the University of North Carolina. Bill Belichick in, Hubert Davis out, and a total new face for the basketball program going forward. Hey, as long as you don't change the uniform, I think we'll be all right. For Brian Murphy, I'm Pat Welter. Stay with us on all our platforms where we'll be discussing Hubert Davis, where UNC goes next with their head coaching position.